You ready, TJ?
Yeah, sure. I wasn't born ready, but I became ready about 2 or 3 days after my birth.
Ready for what?
Just this.
Your whole life has been geared towards this moment on my podcast. Thank
Yeah,
you. I
I'm
appreciate say
excited.
thanks to your mom.
I will.
So the other day, I was just saying to you, the other day I saw you in the middle set. I think it was the third set you did on a night when you did 8 sets. You tweeted later that was your record day of most sets in one
Personal
day.
record on a weekday.
And what's what I mean, I actually could understand the impulse. But what was your impulse in doing 8? Like what's the joy you feel?
Well, I thought that I was gonna be able to do 7. So, it's a couple of things. One, I just started as I was booking sets. Kate is in the south of France, in Avignon, in Provence. And
Does she say it like that?
so but she's starting to learn French. It's very irritating. And but she's sort of she's gone. So I started really setting up, runs around Manhattan. And that Thursday, September 17th, it just sort of came together. I was looking, I was like, I think I can do 7 sets. And so I made it to all of them. And luckily, both the Stand and Greenwich Village Comedy Club, they'll sort of hold the shows for me to get there. And those were my last 2 shows. But yeah, I did 2 sets at the Stand, 1 set at St. Mark's Comedy Club. I started out that show. I went up before the host so that I could get moving. And then I did the comic strip live, which was I almost missed the following one because it was so good. And I was supposed to go up at Caroline's, but I just wasn't going to be able to make it there. But I also had a spot. I had double booked myself at the New York Comedy Club in the East Village. And so it all just kind of worked out. I did 2 sets at the Stand, comic strip live, the East Village, New York Comedy Club, St. Mark's Comedy Club, Greenwich Village Comedy Club, and then and West Side Comedy Club. And then at the end of the night, I went upstairs at the Stand and there was this party and they were doing burlesque and drag show stuff. And it was this guy's birthday. And they told me, they invited anyone who wants to come in there. And because I said, what's going on in there? So it's a surprise birthday party. It's all kind of beverage people, sort of all service industry people. And I said, oh, they're doing, drag shows. And I said, are they doing any comedy? And he said, no, not yet. Why? Do you want to go up? I said, well, that would be 8. And so they checked and it turned out the birthday boy was a huge fan of mine. And so he was so excited. So what I did is I just quickly learned about him from his friends and then went up and just riffed a set all about him, kind of making fun of him.
What were one of the things you learned?
He's a huge Yankees fan, like an unhealthy level of Yankees fan.
And so how did you translate that onto stage?
I just talked about how many things he had. They said he has this crazy collection of hats. And then I was joking about how he leaves his door open, I guess, all the time in his apartment. So I said that I went in there and that he also loves show tunes and he loves Hamilton. And he was a pretty eclectic, bizarre dude. But there was plenty there to make fun of. So I just sort of did what I usually do, which is kind of contextualize behavior. I said that to do research, I snuck into his house or his apartment because the door was open and just kind of did that and didn't try and do any material or anything. Just did that and kind of did, a 10-minute set on that. And so that was 8. So it was an unexpected 8. I thought it was going to be 7. So my previous record is 5, I think.
So doing 7.
It's all on a weekday.
And doing 7, did you feel what did you learn from it? Did you feel exhausted at the end? Like
Well, it's always so interesting. Once you pass 4, you're kind of trying to remember if you've done that joke on that show. But the reason I like doing 7 is you can really solidify an idea and make it great. So, having done 7 on Thursday and then I did shows Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then Monday, I guess, was last night, right? So that I did 6. So on a Thursday between this weekend of shows in Rhode Island, New Jersey, and Long Island, I did 13 shows. And so it's kind of, I've some of the bits that are really were really doing well in the beginning, those, they've already entered that phase of why aren't they doing as well as they did the first times that I tried them?
Is that because you're it's harder to stay in the moment? Like, let's say they killed the set before, the day before. Do you feel like you're almost reenacting the day before, and so it doesn't have.
It takes practice. Once you find something that's organically funny, then it'll stop being funny because it takes practice to go back to making it seem organic. So you have to kind of find your way back into the timing of it and the cadence and all that kind of stuff. So I've got these 2 bits, a bit on pizza and a bit on the saying "Fool me once, shame on you."
I and they're connected. I love both of those bits.
Yeah, and so but those aren't doing as well as they did in the beginning. But then I have a bit about a Kenyan cab driver who thinks he's a comedian and us trading jokes back and forth. And that I used to close at the stand last night. I mean, that's how powerful that thing has become. So, you quickly can pare down what is worth working on and what isn't. And you can more quickly go through that sort of, peaks and valleys of a joke that is there and you'll get there. But, the fun thing is now I'm leaving October 2nd to go with Kate. But the fun thing when she's not in town is I can do that. And I'm setting up, I'm excited in November or early December. I'm just going to do sets and just try and build an arsenal of one-liners. Because I've got about 15 really solid one-liners, but I need like 40.
So
because I use that with the trombone section of my stand-up, and I want to keep using the trombone, but I need new jokes throughout it.
I don't think I've seen you do a one-liner. Like, what's an example one-liner?
The one that I do kind of to warm the audience up into it is like, well, you don't drink, do you?
I do a little.
So do you drink? You ever drink Red Bull vodka?
No.
I do, because I like to be awake when I pass out. So that would be sort of a joke there, but like, I need ones that are more like, I've got one that I need to work and I can't get it to work. It's all conditioner is leave-in conditioner if you don't rinse it out. And no one will laugh at that. So now I've tried to make it a thing where my wife and I are going through divorce proceedings because she doesn't agree with me about that. So I'm like trying to work. There's something very funny about that to me. And yeah, but I need ones that are more like, I went to an Asian massage parlor and I got a massage. And then at the end, she gave me a handy man's phone number and he came over and he fixed the balcony, put up some pictures, and then he jacked me off. So I need more stuff like that in one sentence sort of finds its way to kind of this little laugh, and then a big full laugh. So that's the great thing about New York, especially because you're doing 12-minute sets. You can really take, a set that is just one-liners, and I have enough to start them in that rhythm. And then I just got to keep trying things and work on that. Because if I can get a real big arsenal of one-liners, then I can really, last night I did something that I haven't done forever, which is a lot of people are worried about a receding hairline. I have a proceeding hairline. So it's kind of making its way down my forehead to connect with my eyebrows, and then it's going to maybe take over my face, Cousin It style. And I hadn't done that forever. And so I'm also trying to look back into the archive of things that I haven't put on television. But now the zeitgeist is so fractured, I have no problem doing stuff that was on my HBO special or anything because no one's seen it. No one has seen any of this stuff. And if they have, they've seen so much content since then that it's almost, if they do remember it, they're kind of like, oh yeah, that one.
Well, also like take that hairline one. So you do it at I guess either in Chicago Laugh Factory or Just for Laughs. I forget where you did it, but it's. I think 80% of the joke too is the delivery. So if your delivery has evolved, which it always does, then I don't mind hearing. With music, people don't mind hearing the same songs. Like I feel with comedy, I like to see the nuances, the difference.
Yeah, sometimes. Other times you're like, I've already heard this one. But you're right. I mean, John Mulaney is an example of someone who he has certain jokes like the why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free. And I'll listen to that over and over again. And it's just so funny. So yeah, I think, but I was talking about this with Dustin Chafin, who runs the Greenwich Village Comedy Club. And he's a really funny comic. I tour with him. And just the idea that, we were he wasn't with me. I was there with CJ Sullivan and we were in Jacksonville, Florida. Yeah. I go to some pretty exotic places. And it was very strange because I went on the radio, and then the guy who was booking me on the comedy club kept saying, and I also produce this show. It's going to be in Jacksonville coming up, and it's Rush, and it was all bands from that era. And he said, and don't worry, they're just playing their hits. That's all. Just the hits. No new stuff. They're not going to get up there and be like, we're working on it now. It's just going to be the hits. And that was so tragically heartbreaking that this guy was like, they're just a jukebox, guys. We don't care about them as artists. You don't have to sort of, pander to them wanting to actually be a band. They're just going to play their hits.
But
But bands are like that. I think with comedians, you want to see the person and what they're thinking about and the persona much more than the material.
well,
Woody Allen said that, right? That he said, I began to realize that the writing doesn't do anything if you don't have a persona. It was so much more about the delivery and the persona.
Well, if you think about it, everybody has the choice. They could watch funny cat videos at home on YouTube. So, but instead they're going out to see you, which they could also watch on YouTube or HBO or whatever. So it's sort of like, correct me if you think I'm wrong, sort of like your job is a little bit to create an experience, not just be funny, but create almost an absurd experience for them. That's why they're out of their house to a comedy club to see you.
Yeah, and I talk about that a lot on stage, just how much I appreciate people getting out from behind these screens and how unhealthy social media is. It's so unhealthy that I think in a couple of years we're going to look back at it like it's cigarettes. We're going to see somebody on social media indoors. We're going to be like, take that shit outside. Keep it 15 feet away from the entrance. There are babies around. Secondhand Snapchatting kills. But I really do think that so I thank the audience. I say, please, know that I appreciate that you guys are not sitting in front of a screen, and people really respond to that, but yeah, it is an experience. And it's also just like so much more fun to go to a live show. I have so many people that come to my shows. They go, I'd never seen a stand-up show before. I said, really? You've never seen me before? They're like, no, never seen stand-up live. And I go, well, isn't it great? And they go, yeah. It was great. Like, I can't believe that they didn't think they watch it on Netflix and stuff. But people there's so much content. People always say to me, yeah, I saw your Netflix special. It was great. I loved it. It was so funny. I've watched it over and over. I'm like, okay, I've never had a Netflix special. I've had an HBO special, but that's how little people can even track what is going on or where what they're watching is for this or that. And so people are getting content fatigue and screen fatigue. And
I think that's why they do. Again, that's why
live entertainment is doing better
and I think also a lot of stand-up, and I don't want to be judgmental on anything, but a lot of times people just go up there and do their act. They tell jokes. And I think the audience senses when something's an act as opposed to a unique experience the comedian is giving the audience. And I think you do that extremely well. I remember last time you were on the podcast, you mentioned you had gone to clown school or you studied it a little bit. I wonder if that is related.
I think so. It's also, I was an improviser by trade, so that's what I started in, and sketch comedian, and worked with Second City. And I also, for some reason, have acted in quite a few films. So it's not, stand-up is not the only thing that I've done. And so I try and bring all of that stuff to the stand-up. So if you actually see my show, there's juggling, and there's, an audience member plays the trombone, and I have a ventriloquist dummy that has a smaller ventriloquist dummy. And so it's just a very dynamic show, and people kind of respond to that for sure. Yeah.
And I've noticed with your sets when I've seen you live that you make the room itself a prop of the set. So you'll go into a room, you'll say, "Oh, we have a disco ball here," and then you'll make a bunch of jokes about it. Or the other night at the Art House Hotel, you noticed all the way in the back a printer, and you did a whole bunch of jokes about how you were going to be late for a plane.
Pass, yeah.
Yeah. And so thank God there's a printer in the room.
Yeah.
And so I noticed with each set, the first thing you do is you look around the room to see what you could pull from.
But that's the improviser. It's, if you're used to riffing and making things funny off the top of your head, then it doesn't even have to be completely invented. You already have this kind of, you look around and you're just like, wow, you got really fleeced by some graffiti artist that came in here and fucking was like, it's going to be fluorescent, but it's New York, but it's also really shittily done. So you have so much to be able to work with. And yeah, the guy's like, and then I'll do a lot of like ha ha ha. It's like all different types of ha's because it's a comedy club. It's like a comedy podcast venue. So, what you're looking for is people to be like, ha, 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 ha. So I'll represent that in fluorescent on the wall. What do you think? It's 10 grand. You could pay me in Bitcoin. So it's just
Probably
like,
what we did pay for it.
I know, but it's
before my time.
It was before your time. But no, I mean, I think I also want to acknowledge that we're all in this place. And I always say, I'll never perform for this exact audience again, and no audience will ever see this exact show again. And I want to make it clear that that's true. That's not just lip service.
Well, like another thing I saw you do the other day is you did a high five with the woman sitting in the front, but only the fingertips, and then only like one finger. So again, it was like you set up this game that you were able to go back to over and over again throughout the set, and she clearly didn't want to, but part of the humor was the tension, and that could only happen in a live experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually more clown. Anything where you're interacting with the audience and they kind of don't know what to do or maybe don't want to be a part of it. That's a big clown thing. Clowns always come over and, if somebody's bald, they'll shine their head they'll spit shine the head and they just do all that kind of stuff. They'll pick somebody up and they'll put on a wig and they'll kind of tell them stop being coy, but then they'll go in to kiss them and then slap them. And, it's just all this stuff where the audience doesn't have any choice in being part of the show. But I did this thing last night. I brought my Polaroid. In my rider, I have a Polaroid camera that I bring in. I need film. And often I have leftover film. So I had like 100 Polaroid pictures, just a lot of film. So I took the camera and I was just going to take pictures as I went around to different shows, just almost kind of a scrapbook of that night. And what I ended up doing was I just thought this was funny because the Polaroid has this really big flash. And so I think in the first set, just as a joke, I kind of said, a lot of comedians don't want you to take flash photography because it's distracting. It kind of throws them off. But I actually found that I do better with flash photography. So I give someone in the audience in the front row the camera and I tell them to take flash photographs of me throughout the show. And that was a great running gag because if they stopped doing it, I would be like, what are you doing? And each time they took a picture and the flash goes off, I would I'm in the middle of a bit and I'd be like, thank you. And then I keep going. And people really got behind that. And then I was bombing at the West Side Comedy Club because I went up after John Fish and they had gotten into his kind of style. And I was just doing stuff and it wasn't working. And then I realized I'd forgotten the camera. I go, oh, I know what's wrong. And so I go get the camera and I come back up and I do that. And then everybody got behind it. So that's kind of a fun bit that just arose out of the blue, but is a running gag that I can return to. And I think I'll do that at least at one show a weekend from here on out.
Right. So
it's expensive. It's $1 a picture. So it costs about.
So it's interesting though.
$50 a night for that bit.
Like some things are bits that you write out or think out or figure out on stage. Others are like, again, these games you set up with the audience, like the high-fiving the woman or the giving someone in the audience the camera. Again, like this clown-like stuff. What's the difference between a clown and, let's say, traditional stand-up comedy for you? Maybe there's no difference.
Well, at the end of my set, I say, I'm all kinds of comedian. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm an improvisational comedian. I'm a sketch comedian. I do film comedy. I do television comedy. I even do children's animation. Although I don't believe that children deserve to laugh as much as adults because they're not yet aware of their own mortality. And then I say, but if you strip it all down, I am a clown. And I think, having props, interacting with the audience, being, a very physical comedian, all those are elements of clown. And I think a purist stand-up would just say it's just a guy, a microphone, and kind of jokes and thoughts and observations and that kind of stuff. But I had this agent at CAA he was supposed to be my East Coast stand-up agent, and he came and saw my show at the comic strip where I headlined. And afterwards, he was like, I have all these notes for you. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll listen. And he was like, yeah, lots of people call them RAs, real assholes. They don't want to hear any of the notes. And I was like, well, no, I'm happy to. I think criticism is always great. And he proceeded to be like, so in your hour, you're not going to do like the juggling or the ventriloquist dummy or the trombone or anything, right? And I was like, what? And I thought he was joking. So I was like, oh, yeah, no, that's the only thing that separates me from all the other white guys doing comedy. So why would I do that? And he was like, good, yeah, because, everybody's seen juggling and everybody's seen ventriloquism. And I was like, no one has ever done that bit with ventriloquism. I'm not a ventriloquist. I'm not doing. And I was like, and name one other comedian that juggles? One. And he goes, oh, what's his name? And I was like, see? And he goes, no. Chris Bliss. And I was like, what? Who is Chris Bliss? And this agent goes, no. Here, don't always step on the punchlines. I go, who's Chris Bliss? And the guy goes, exactly. And I went, with all due respect, not to be strange, but Chris Bliss has not been in like 20 studio films, and he's not. I mean, people don't know who he is because I guess he was a juggling comedian. Because I remember him. And the guy goes, yeah, but I'm a real purist. I like Dave Attell. And I said, so then you must like John Mulaney. He's like, no, I don't like him. And it was just this whole weird thing. And I said, who did juggle for a while was Steve Martin. And that worked out pretty well for him. And he doesn't even juggle as well as I do. And this guy just didn't get it. And so I haven't talked to him since. I just, he actually didn't understand that I'm doing something different from everybody else. And he wanted me to stop doing that because he thought I was a good stand-up without that stuff.
Well, it's interesting. Like you referred to the word arsenal when you were describing your one-liners. Like all of these things, like kind of the crowd work, the making the room a prop, the games you set up with the audience, plus your written material. Now the one-liners. I think a lot of your stuff that I've seen has been kind of making stories, even stories that happened to you that day, like really funny. I'm curious, the one-liners is almost the other direction. Are you doing that as a challenge for yourself, or what's the
challenging?
difficulty?
But I have a section of my show where I give a trombone to somebody in the audience and they become the rim shot. So instead of bum, it's them playing the trombone. And so that's always funny and it's always different because the person who plays the trombone is always different. And the punchline to the bit is always the same to the overall bit, but each joke before the rim shot is a one-liner. And so I just need more of those so that when I come back to a market a second time, they're excited about the trombone, but it's different one-liners.
But your one-liners, like for instance, ones that you were just saying, those are not the kind of rim shot style one-liners, right? I usually think of like when they do the boom boom, it's a bad one-liner. Those were good one-liners you were doing.
It's like Henny Youngman, yeah. Right. Yeah, he would do like a I like your early Native American features. You look like a buffalo. So those things didn't quite make sense really, but they were still like, oh yeah, I'll laugh because the rim shot. But yeah, I want things that'll be funny, sort of stand alone, and that's why it's good to do them in New York because I don't have the trombone rim shot, so they actually need to work. But
what's the challenge in writing those?
I mean, that it's not my forte, so it just takes a little bit more time. But I get, we get there. Some of them I'll do, and I don't think that they're that funny. Like I riff this one where I say, whenever I meet twins, I always say, can I ask you a question? And invariably one of them says, oh, what? If you pinch me, does he feel it? And I turn to the other and I go, no, but when he says something stupid, do you regret it? And that's like,
oh my God, that's great.
That worked okay. And then now it just kills. So it's also just like doing them over and over and trying to get them exactly perfect. But they're pretty fun. I had a conversation with Anthony Jeselnik and he was like, you can write a new hour in like a couple months, but it takes me months to get 5 minutes of new material because all of his stuff is one-liners for the most part. Even though I've seen him riff and just tell stories and he's so good, but that's what he wants. He wants to be a sort of a craftsman of these sort of very succinct, short jokes.
Yeah, and it seems like with him, it's he always sets himself up as kind of the hero in the first half of the joke, and then just crushes down like he's the worst person possible in the last half of the joke. But he's very likable the way he expresses it. Like it's
because you can kind of tell that he's not that, and he is a really nice guy. But sometimes, like he and I aren't really friends anymore because sometimes he wants to be that thing so badly that he'll kind of step on any relationship or friendship that he has. And for that reason, I think he's going to be very lonely and die alone. I don't ever see him finding unconditional love in a partner that he feels respect for.
So with your one-liners, like,
Oh, and I have a joke about him.
okay.
I wanted to do this, but I haven't really done it. But it's like, everybody loves Anthony Jeselnik. They think he's so funny. He's so good at what he does. But anybody can do it. Watch. I'll do it right now. How many of you know who Anthony Jeselnik is? Exactly. And that's a funny joke if you know him, but nobody knows him. So like the joke's too true to the audiences that I play, and they're like, "Yeah, what is he talking about?" Like some people have heard of him, but nobody's like, you have to be a comedy person to really be into his stuff or a certain demographic, because people come to my shows and they go, "We love you in Deadpool. I love Silicon Valley, and our kid loves the Emoji Movie." So I have this really strange, broad swath, they call it, a swath of, fans. Sort of my demographics are really, really, wide range on the spectrum. And some of my fans are on the spectrum. I'm talking to one right now across from me.
It's probably true. So again, with the storytelling, I've seen you go up and say, like, I remember one time, it's like maybe a year ago, you had a cast on your arm. I don't know if you had a broken arm or what, but
Yeah,
you went up on stage. Like, I think you were in the hospital that day or the day before.
Infection. Get on your phones and text about it.
So you get up on stage and you tell this hilarious story that must have happened just that day or the day before, where you were in the hospital. And it seems like, again, where you're, I don't want to say you're forte, but like, I've seen you do lots of great stories on stage, and it works really well. Like, and I think it's a hard thing to turn a real story into something funny, because you're seeing the reality of that story in a different way than everyone else in the audience. And on top of it, you have to throw in kind of the funny in between. It's
just, I mean, if you do as much comedy as I've done, you start to see the world. My insignia is a jester's eye. It's like an eye with a jester's hat on it. And that's sort of to signify that you can see everything through comedy, but not just comedy, like a jester's version. So that's sort of witty and incisive and sometimes cutting, but still with a smile or a grin or a laugh,
and I mean, you can look at again, like the clown. Part of that is being authentic on stage in that moment, as opposed to just repeating an act.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a lot of it is very improvisational. I try and go up and start by talking to the audience and picking people out, because then from the get-go, and you've got something. But I did a show at the Paramount in Huntington, Long Island, and I had a wireless microphone. It was a theater, so I just went into the audience and I was talking to people. I went into the audience in Rahway, New Jersey, and the mayor was there. So I was like, "Mr. Mayor, how are you? And I'm welcome to the show," and all this stuff. And then I licked his hand. And I was like, "I just licked a mayor." How many of you have ever seen someone lick a mayor? I'm a mayor licker. He tastes like good infrastructure and a driven campaign agenda, And that was just so funny to that stuff, they know. It's like, he did not lick a mayor in the last show.
And you did that, and what was it?
They know I lick a mayor more often than I don't lick a mayor. I'm a mayor licker.
Wait, you also
I'm a major mayor licker.
You also ran into the audience. What was the award show? You ran into the audience and just started talking to random
Critics'
people.
Choice Awards, because we needed to vamp. We needed more time. I had to go on for more time. And so I said, "Fuck it, I'll just go into the audience." But that was so strange, because Ryan Gosling clearly was like, "I don't want to talk to you." And I forget the people I talked to, but it was just really, really crazy. Tom Ford, I think I made a joke to, and somebody else. And then Rami Malek was cool. He's a good dude. But yeah, you want to, the more you improvise, the more special the audience feels.
And then
it's like Bitcoin.
It's probably true. And then on the other side of the spectrum from the clown, you have a guy like Jon Stewart, who you could imagine looks at the news through eyes of comedy, or John Oliver or
To be sure. And I think Jon Stewart's really good at just whatever happened yesterday, he can make it funny today. Or even what happened today. I saw him and Chappelle at Red Rocks in Colorado, and that was amazing. It was really interesting to see two very complimentary comedians who are so absolutely different, but they both were kind of talking about what's going on right now. And it's kind of a bad time for comedy. I didn't really think that I would ever see in my lifetime it get this bad. But I wasn't a comedian when that 90s PC swing happened. So when suddenly people were demanding, like, you call them African Americans, not black people, that's gone out the window. You know what I mean? Now, I don't think there's a black person that I know who would be like, it's African American. And so, that's so maybe comedy was tough then as well. But right now it's just such a disaster that people can get fired for things they said on podcasts years ago. And it's the media's fault. This sort of internet mob mentality is really, really unhealthy.
Yeah,
It's
like
like
look,
Bitcoin.
I know you keep bringing up Bitcoin. No comment on Bitcoin. But Dave Chappelle, with his recent special, you're right. Like he even says in the beginning, "I'm going to get torn apart for this special." He makes fun of the audience because they're the ones who are going to do it, and then they proceed to do it. Not that specific audience, but the wider TV
Well,
audience.
no, I mean, not even that. It's just all the Vanity Fair and all these writers were like, isn't it getting old talking about how terrible this? It's like, no, that's the job of the comedian. And that special is so funny. And all of his trans stuff is so
Yeah,
funny. And when I travel, what I've begun to realize, and I'm so lucky I'm a stand-up and not just an actor in Hollywood. As I travel, I begin to realize that everywhere I went, people, they're talking about trans rights and the right pronouns and all this stuff, and it doesn't apply. Most people's lives, they're like, I don't know anybody who's trans. You're making a huge deal out of 0.0000001% of the population. And everybody in America is like, who cares? I just want to have a little bit more money this year to go to Disneyland twice. And so that's just, nobody's got the right, all the values are totally off. It's really sad to see because I don't know that he's going to lose this time because just the liberals are still so, the left, I should say, the left is just so like caught up in these issues that don't speak to anyone.
and I feel like it's almost this righteous indignation where they didn't actually listen to the special. Like almost everything they were saying was factually incorrect. The first one being, I saw one article saying he was unfunny. Well, everyone in the audience was laughing hysterically, and he got a 99% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. So that part's wrong. And then everybody was complaining what he said about Michael Jackson. Like he said he thought Michael Jackson didn't do it. But then just a few minutes later, he says he doesn't know if Michael Jackson did it or not. So people just they're just picking out the things they want to write in. They're going to get a
Need
promotion.
something that's clickbait. Yeah. And I guess to get a promotion. But that stuff was so funny. I mean, the idea that like they got molested by Michael Jackson, and that the rest of us who got molested just have a awkward Thanksgivings for the rest of our life. Like and that's just a really funny idea. And that's all it's supposed to be. It's just supposed to be an idea. He doesn't want kids to get molested even by Michael Jackson, but that's gone out the window. And I read an article today, which was the weirdest thing, where on page 6, they wrote up that those 8 sets, because Jeffrey Gurian sort of was trying to get that in there. That guy's a lunatic. I love him. And then somebody on some stupid site that nobody reads was like, TJ Miller is available for birthday parties. And then halfway through the article, he goes, he probably was just trying to do something good for this guy and round off his 8 sets. And then he just went, it just doesn't make any sense. And he's like, he got canceled a while ago for this, but apparently that didn't last long. And then at the end, it's like, and he was in a Steven Spielberg movie, although not a very good one, but neither was the guy but you don't see the kid from AI running around doing birthday party shows. But then again, he's too busy not getting fired from Silicon Valley. It's like, none of that makes sense. Like,
Okay,
none of it.
How do you
Like,
feel?
really, none of it. Like, Steven Spielberg film, no one is in his films. So that's not something that you're like, ugh. Ready Player One was a great movie. People loved it. The kid from AI isn't a stand-up, so why would he be running around doing birthday shows? I wasn't fired from Silicon Valley. The HBO and Mike Judge and all of those people have confirmed that I wanted to not be on it and I left. And so just all of that is fake. It was like I did a set at the comic strip, and this young girl, and I felt kind of bad for her. She just doesn't know what she's doing. She's going to Hunter College, and she's 20 nothing, and she's moved here from Austin, and she came in the second night that I was there, and she goes, I just wanted to tell you that I told my boyfriend that I had met you, and he was like, I heard he's a real asshole. And I was like, no, he's really, really nice. And my friend Dustin made the joke. He's like, why would she say, why do you want to know that? Why would she tell you that before you go on stage? Like, what is the use of that information? But my joke was, you heard I was an asshole from who? One of your friends? Who's your friend? The internet? Like, how did he hear that I was like, what does that even mean? And I love that she's like, but I defended you. And I'm like, I don't care. So I kind of had to say to her, like, yeah, when you're going to hear that a lot. When you're famous, that's something that, and I'll never forget, I was with my then agent, and Aziz Ansari was playing the Vic Theater in Chicago, and he did all these press things. And then the Chicago Reader, which is the city paper, wanted to do an interview with him. And he said, I just can't do any more interviews. So this writer proceeded to write the 10 reasons that he thought Aziz Ansari wasn't funny. And I was like, that's pretty funny, because Aziz and I haven't had the best interactions in person. I was like, that's pretty funny. And the agent goes, yeah, I mean, once you get big enough, that stuff happens. Everybody's trying to like take you down. I was like, I don't know if that's true. And it is true. It's really, really true that people just can't handle the idea that you would be important enough to not care about them. It's just, that's the worst. And especially journalists and these writers, because none of these writers really make a living writing for, I'm not even sure you can make a living writing for vulture.com if you're not one of the main writers. So some of these big sites, I think these people still are doing web design or something else.
There is no, I think maybe 20 years ago you can make a living on the internet writing, but now it's zero, because there's 20 people behind you willing to write for free.
And so many of those people are so bitter, and they'll try and say anything to just get clickbait, to get the clicks, to ideally have the site go, yeah, we'd like you to keep writing from us. But what are they getting paid? They can't be getting paid more than a couple $100 for an article.
So
you can't live off that.
I mean, I went through something not similar to what you're describing, but similar in a different area. Now Bitcoin. There was like a whole bunch of articles written about it.
To Bitcoin.
There was a whole bunch of
articles I've been
articles
wanting to talk to you about, because I'm friends with the Winklevoss twins. Continue.
Yeah. All right. So I there was all these articles written about me and Bitcoin, and I would have the reporter read back what I just said, just to confirm that she heard me or he heard me. And then they would always misquote me in the article and lie. And it actually, I had been written about before, and I had the Twitter mob before, but this particular time really bothered me, because it was both a bunch of reporters and articles and actually people I knew, and the Twitter mob. And I really hated it. It really bothered me.
Well, it's frustrating. You have to sort of shake your head and kind of tune out the noise. Kate gets really mad at me if I read Google alerts for myself or anything. She just is like, what is that going to do? It doesn't, she's always saying, you sell out everywhere. These people, everybody wants to do the VIP meet and greet. She's like, why do you care what these like bitter internet people say? And I did it a little bit to desensitize myself, because now I read it, I'm like, give me a break. But what's really sad, I think, not as much the affront to truth that they're kind of misquoting you and lying and just saying whatever they want to say. The real thing that I think is so tragic is that, Donald, this happened with Hitler. Speaking of Jews, this happened when Hitler took over, as he said, the Jewish media, the Jewish press is, lying, and they're taking, and there was enough there for the public to be like, yeah, the press does lie. And you can't just say that if people aren't being irresponsible with their journalism and their writing. They have to be at least a little bit irresponsible. And now with the internet, they are just full blown, completely irresponsible. So everyone in America is like, yeah, CNN is just trying to get ratings as much as Fox. And so the free press has really collapsed upon itself. And That's what's really sad is that, and people don't see it. There's just so much anger or whatever, but they don't get that if they don't clarify and say, well, actually, people thought that TJ might have been fired from Silicon Valley, but he wasn't. He left of his own accord. If they never say that, if they just say the thing that's mean or what, then they fatigue the reader to the point where they're like, I don't even want to read this thing anymore.
But I
And then
think
there's less clicks, less advertising, so they get even meaner and more outrageous. And it's just this vicious cycle. And I don't know where it's headed. Nowhere good.
I don't think it's heading anywhere good either. Like I was
But what did
once
they misquote you on with, not to get into the
okay.
particulars, but
I'll tell you. So they said,
or
and
what's one example? What's one example?
they said they asked me, were you manipulating Amazon stock by claiming Amazon will one day accept Bitcoin? And I said, first off, how can I, a single person, manipulate a stock that's traded tens of billions of dollars worth a day? Like, how could I possibly do that? And I said, do you agree that that's impossible? And she didn't say anything. And I said, do you agree that that's impossible? And she said, yes, that's impossible. And then she said, in the article, James is manipulating Amazon's stock. And so then it goes on Twitter, James is pumping and dumping stocks. It's Amazon. It trades $100 billion worth a day. Like, who do people think I am? But then, like, literally people would unfriend me and all this stuff. So finally, at 3 a.m. one night, I wrote on Twitter, if anyone has a problem with me, call me. And I put my phone number, and I was talking for like the next 24 hours on the phone, which is the stupidest waste of a day you could ever have.
I cannot do that. Even though one of my phone numbers has been published, it's like, yeah, I could not. And it is a waste of your time. I mean, why do you engage with those people who quote unquote have a problem with you? And that is insane that she would say that. And of course she wants to do that. And Bitcoin is also in this space where people still don't quite understand or know about it. But if I would say, we had dinner with Tyler and Cameron, and the Winklevi speculated that Bitcoin would either spike to 20 after the crash and then come down to 15, or they said, or it just is going to go and hover at 10. Well, that's what it's doing, but they didn't know that. And even if they had said that's what we think is going to happen, they can't control the market by what they say, even if they do own 1% of all Bitcoin. And I don't know how much Bitcoin you own, but it's like they have a lot of fucking Bitcoin and they're not manipulating the market with what they say or not. And they also are, they built Gemini because they understand that we're still very far away from mass adoption.
Right. Like,
but Kate and I tried, their exchange was too hard to get into, but it's probably one of the safest. But I tried to get in when they crashed and was at 5,500, and I just could not get in until it was at 8. But now it feels like it's creeping its way down. But I think, the idea behind hodling is that this is a thing that even if it's just store value, which it won't be, we're waiting for something to happen that just isn't going to happen next year,
Right. Like, look, the internet, when was the first time you put your credit card into an e-commerce website? Probably a full 30 years after the internet was developed, and 10 or 11 years after the web was developed. Like, things just
and even then,
take time.
Even then, for a long time, people were going, hey, look, are you really, can you trust that site to put your credit card in? There was also that growth period,
Right.
But because I got crazy about blockchain after meeting them and did that thing where you just go into a blockchain hole and you just for weeks, you're just learning about it and watching videos and all that stuff. And, I basically only got interested in Ethereum and Bitcoin, but it is this thing of sort of, once you've learned enough about it, you do realize that this is not the end of it. It's not $10,000 for each coin is not where this is going to remain. It's like, because there's a limited amount of it, when people say it's going to be $100,000 a coin or $1 million a coin, there's no way to say that that's not true.
Right. And also, it's one of these things where it can't stay at 10,000. It's either going to zero because people move on and the value wasn't there, or it's going to be some huge number because, okay, currency needs to evolve. 2008, 2009 crisis showed us that we don't really have a proper understanding of paper money. And so that's when Bitcoin was developed to solve some of the problems of paper or what's called fiat
Fiat,
money.
yeah.
And it works. Like the problems were solved by this originally theoretical thing, Bitcoin. Now we wait and see as it gets adopted, but it's been around 10 years. It is used for transactions. Every time that some country has political troubles, there's a flight to safety into Bitcoin. Bitcoin spikes up. So some billionaires are using it. So
And I think too, yeah, it is that sort of thing that you're saying, which is it just takes a long time for something to become adopted in a mass way. But my friend who works for the Daily Show, who does not like it, he just thinks it's a leftist propaganda machine. But he very shrewdly said, and I've had conversations with the Winklevi about this, that, we were talking about, we were like, okay, it was the housing crisis. Before that, it was the dot-com sort of bubble that exploded. And we're like, what is the next thing? It's got to be something that people aren't really looking at or can't believe that it would happen, just like the housing collapse. And he thinks, and I sort of agree, that it's the dollar, that there's going to be some moment coming up where the dollar just becomes devalued. It's happened to every other country for the most part, and we just can't stay that. And this president is waiting dangerously close to that typhoon that comes if you piss off one of our major, like China or something like that. That if that becomes a huge problem, and there is some genuine, real, long-lasting conflict, that's when the dollar just collapses.
yeah, because if you think of it, the two things you named were the housing crisis, which actually it wasn't a housing crisis, it was the derivatives around housing. So housing prices peaked in 2006. They were already starting to come back in 2008, but then all of the options upon options upon options on housing, those collapsed, and then that wiped all the banks out. So it's this weird financial kind of complicated innovation that caused everything to collapse. With the internet, it wasn't like so much that internet companies were a fad, but there was every banker was taking every .com public. So there was this boom of IPOs of kind of stock that was worthless that people were buying, and then that collapsed. So now your point here is that the dollar itself is a fiction, just like that those
Just
internet
like the
stocks.
value of the stocks, just like the
Every
the
financial
the
innovation, junk
value of
bonds in the
the
80s.
money that you've lended. Yeah, exactly. So I think, that'll be interesting to see if that's exactly what happens. But we can't, we can't just assume that the dollar is bulletproof just because it's had that record. I mean, people were getting bigger houses than they wanted to have, but Kate gets very frustrated because she likes to stockpile cash. So we have a lot of like cash. But we've taken a pretty strong position in Bitcoin just because I think, between you and the Winklevi, the people that are, and, some other people that I know, smart people are kind of seeing the potentiality of this long term, because you're never going to make any real money day trading. Right now, Bitcoin is a lot like penny stocks for a lot of people. And if they can't afford much Bitcoin, then they go into Ripple and all these other altcoins. But that's not really, Bitcoin is gold, and we hope that Ethereum is silver or whatever else,
Yeah.
you diversify with. And so that's kind of where we are. And I bought some Ripple and things like that, but the Bitcoin is the thing that's blockchain currency.
Right, and that's the one that's been around the longest. It's the most amount of thought has been put
And
into it.
it's the
It's
only
clearly
thing
not a
that's really
scam.
accepted right now. You
Yeah.
can't really pay a bunch of places to, but yeah, you can pay at Barnes and Noble and these other places that are rushing the Facebook coin, which is essentially a slightly decentralized coin, but it still has a central, almost banking system type of thing. This Walmart coin that's coming out, and they'll all have coins, but Bitcoin will suddenly be this thing that you can use at all those places, because they're not going to say no to value. They're not going to say, we don't accept Bitcoin. They could say, you'll have to turn your Bitcoin into Amazon,
Yeah.
coins, but you know, you're still able to move freely with Bitcoin.
I mean, people don't realize how close. I mean, maybe people do realize, but in 2008, 2009, the dollars in your pocket were almost worthless. Like, and then this centralized bank started pumping so much dollars into the economy, it was a guess. Nobody really knew what would happen to the dollar. And to your point about Trump and these tariff wars, who knows when there's a tipping point where we can go too far. It's always some financial innovation or some financial danger that we've never hit before that kind of throws everything upside down. So like when you ask what's next, it's got to be something from the financial world where we're in an area where people don't understand.
Exactly. I mean, it's got to be something that no one can predict. That's what The Big Short was about, that
Yeah.
only a couple people were like, hey, wait a second. The housing market, we need to sure it's become overvalued, like these stocks that for the tech companies that went public. I mean, WeWork is dealing with that right now. That
Yeah.
it's the latest thing where it's like, this might be a company that's going to lose money and has lost money and is not going to turn a profit. So that whole model is really, really strange to me. But I think, the thing that nobody's really talking about is that China doesn't care about its people. And America, for the most part, the president doesn't care about the American people, but America does care about every person. And in China, so if you go to war with China for a tariff war or something, they're going to win because they're willing to have their people starve or their lives go south. And Americans they're not used to that. They're not, I'll do anything for the country. I'm a slave to the country. So I think the other thing is people aren't really understanding how different these other countries are that he's fooling around with, It's just very strange. And North Korea, that guy's crazy. Like, what's to say he doesn't just decide, like, let's launch a, missile just to scare the United States and I'll go in a bunker. And if a bunch of the people in my country die, well, that's just what happens. It's just it's a very strange time right now. But I do love, I always talk about this with Cash Levy. I have a podcast, Cashing In with TJ Miller. Check it out. It's on Himalaya, which is an app that nobody uses. It's also on iTunes and Stitcher and gregspods.org, which is a made up site. And, but you kind of,
I like that as a .org.
I know it's a .org. It has to be.
It's a charitable.
I can't say .gov. They'll get upset with me. Cash Levy and I are always talking about how we're just so lucky that the founding fathers of this country were such geniuses that they set up a system that we complain about when nothing gets done. But when what has happened, he kind of can't tear the whole thing down. There's just too many checks and balances and too much red tape, And once we kind of got Congress, then it was like everybody could sigh a little bit of, relief because, if it's a completely Republican held government, then some damage can be done. But if you have just one of the checks and balances be, at least somewhat sane, but it's crazy that Republicans kind of fell in line with him. I just never thought that would happen. You just didn't think that they could stoop that low. And then they did because they just all are so afraid of losing.
Who do you want for 2020?
I still would like somebody to emerge as I think everybody's going to vote for who they think can beat him. That's kind of what this has become, which is dangerous, guessing what the rest of the country, who they're going to vote for. I think Yang is really interesting and would be a really great, we started giving a little bit of money to him. But I think Yang would be interesting for a lot of reasons. And I just I think Elizabeth Warren looks too much like Hillary Clinton. That's how superficial this country can be. And I think that Bernie kind of doesn't have the momentum that he had when he first ran. And that, if you see that documentary Michael Moore did, he really got robbed of that nomination. But so I don't know. So we've sort of stopped giving him money just to kind of see what he can do without I also really realized that you have to look at the bigger picture. It is a populist vote that is going to win this thing. And so I don't know. Yang would be so cool because he's approaching it from such a different standpoint,
Well, I feel like Yang could sit here at the table with us and just have a conversation. Whereas if it's like other candidates, it feels like it would be more practiced or rehearsed.
Right.
Whereas
exactly.
Yang is, and
he's got good ideas. People are like, what is this universal basic income? Give me a break. Even Bernie's talking about it. It's like, if you just tax the 0.01%, just a little bit more, that's just billions of dollars in revenue.
Also, Yang
Billions. It's only 350 million Americans.
But Yang also says if you put a 10% sales tax on everything, normally that's considered hurtful to poorer people. But his point is, if I'm giving 12,000 a year to people, they're still better off unless they spend 120,000 a year, which they're not going to do because they're only making 12,000 a year. So he's got the math, whereas a lot of these other candidates don't have the math for what they're saying, and it's interesting down each point. Like his book, the War Against Normal People, is he explains each thing. It's really good.
Seen it. I'm gonna read that one. But yeah, I don't know. It's really frustrating because it's like if he had a prayer, I would just get behind him completely. But he would have to really mobilize the younger vote, and so many people are still in Bernie's camp, and I think so many women are kind of going, she's got to have a pussy. This president's got to have a pussy, and so Elizabeth Warren, Nancy Pelosi, and I'm like, what happened to AOC? Like, it's just gotten really, really. Kamala Harris, we know her; she's brilliant, but she's sort of faded into the background. It's very strange. Beto O'Rourke, people liked for a second, but now he's got a security team carrying around Nerf guns and stuff. I mean, it just seems like nobody knows how to capture the American public's attention. And that's a real problem because that's all he needs is for people to be split. And Biden, I think, would be a good president if only that he kind of hasn't really bought into all this stuff. He's still kind of making fun of the outrage culture. And that is, I think, what connects with Americans right now. I think Americans are waiting for somebody to go, this internet cancel culture bullshit. Give me a break. Oh, I smelled somebody's hair. Who cares? And he's got some, he's gonna get good things done. He's not gonna do anything bad. But I would vote for a rock, instead of this guy. I'd vote for a dog that has developmental issues. Like, it's just a bad situation. And anybody who disagrees is like not paying attention or just is doubling down on their mistake. I mean, it was sort of a mistake. I don't know that she would have been great, but she would have been a lot better than the situation that we found ourselves in now.
Yeah, and we had a guy
especially
on
with climate changes. Like, that's starting to be what people should be talking about. Kate and I always say if we ran for president, we would just focus on two things: climate change and the economy. That's all anybody cares about. If you really boil it down, not pro-life, not pro-choice, not any of that stuff. It's climate change and the economy.
Why do you think not just the economy? Because like you said earlier, people just want to know they're making a little extra money so they could go to Disneyland
Younger
twice.
people don't. They're thinking about climate change.
But younger people don't vote is the problem.
Well, if you focused on climate change and you were like, I need your vote so that we can fix this thing and save the human species, by the time she and I would run, and it's never been done that you would run on the same ticket. There's never been a husband and wife that ran for president. It's always like a first lady, or it would be a first husband or something. So they've never done that. And that would be a really dynamic thing because you could balance each other out. One of you could be like, I think these fucking idiots are. And the other person is like, he gets excited about this stuff, but we need to find a middle road. And
so was that you and imagining you and Kate talking to the public?
Yeah, or we can turn it around the other way. It doesn't matter. You just have to manipulate them into voting.
Just kidding. We had a professional campaign guy on the podcast the other day, and he was saying how whoever wins Iowa, out of all elections, 43% of them, whoever wins Iowa wins the nomination. So and the problem is Andrew Yang's not campaigning in Iowa.
No, he is.
Oh, he is?
He just set up offices and he has two people. Or no, he's got a full-time staff of 8 or something. He knows that that's his Hail Mary. If he can somehow get Iowa to get behind him as a person, he could do it. The problem is Iowa's exactly almost 50-50 in terms of their ideology of Des Moines, which is like super hip, young, very cool, very smart. And then all of your farmland and smaller towns that are it's just such a strange mix now, but much more so than 4 years ago. I mean, I played Des Moines just recently, and it is barcade, coin-op bars, and vegan pizza places. I mean, it's becoming a place like Omaha where you're like, yeah, right, Des Moines, Iowa. And it's like, no, Des Moines, Iowa. Although their T-shirts say, hell yeah, Des Moines, hell yeah. Okay. So like that's the edginess that you can get.
Although I'm not sure. Did you just make a positive comparison to Omaha? I'm still not there on the Omaha.
No, I mean, when's the last time you went to Omaha?
2005.
Yeah, so I go there every year.
Mhm.
And it's just a lot cooler than you would have ever imagined. And, Warren Buffett has infected that city in a positive way. Everybody there is financially savvy. Everybody there, it's very interesting what it's like there, but they have kind of vintage t-shirt shops and impossible burger joints. And, it's just a very smart, they got great music, pretty good stand-up scene. So this is a different America than 4 years ago. So it'll be really interesting. But yeah, if Yang could get Iowa, then I think people would start. All he needs is something where people are like, wait, this guy could win.
Right, because then he's going to appeal to those people who feel disenfranchised. Like, oh, I really will get that $1,000 a month. It's going to happen. Then it's game over. So that's the big challenge for
That
him.
would be amazing. It would just be amazing to get $1,000 a month. That would change so many people's lives, so
Yeah.
much more than any tax cuts or any kind of stuff. I mean, Trump is just, we didn't benefit that much from it, but we spent so much money giving money to Hillary Clinton so that we could be taxed more. And the people that voted for him didn't understand. They just didn't get the math of it. I guess that's the whole Yang math thing. It's like, they just didn't get it. So we're coming to the end, unfortunately.
Yes.
But I want to talk about the things that you really want to talk about.
Well, I've been enjoying the
We
conversation.
talked about Bitcoin. I was excited about talking about Bitcoin.
You have a movie coming out, Underwater, January 2020.
Kristen Stewart and I did a film with Vincent Cassell called Underwater, January 10th. It's a thriller. It's a throwback to my Cloverfield days. I'm not going to say that my character in Underwater is related to my character in Cloverfield, but if you watch closely, you might see some sort of Easter egg comparisons that this might not be a prequel or a sequel, but sort of a parallel. Well, you go see the movie, and then
What else you got going on?
it's going to be great. And it's I filmed that 10 years after I did Cloverfield, so it was really interesting to film that. And it's very much like Cloverfield, and so you're going to see how much I've developed as like a comedic actor in that time, and I'm pretty interested and proud of that work. Then I did a film with Drew Barrymore that's sort of a super dark film called The Stand-In, where she plays two parts. She plays a disgraced movie star and that movie star's stand-in, and the stand-in sort of starts to take over her life and try and take over her life when she becomes isolated because the media sort of has attacked her. And that's very relevant and very right now. But I think I'm realizing we're gonna have a tough time getting into festivals because studios don't make great films with great actors anymore. So the festivals are where Meryl Streep and Steven Soderbergh and Tahiki Wakahiki or whoever did Jojo Rabbit, those movies are going to these festivals. So it's stiff competition. And then also the movie darkly makes fun of this media frenzied cancel culture, just people being terrible to people in Hollywood. And I don't think Hollywood is okay with making fun of that as much as we had hoped.
When are you going to break the 8 sets in one day record?
I don't know. It's possible. I didn't even really get the routing, and I didn't start until 8:15. So if I can do a bringer show or two, those are start at like 5:30 or 6:30. It could be pretty easy to pass 10. So I'm going to go for 11. I think would be the next
I haven't
step.
spoken to Aaron Berg about it yet, but he did like 25.
He did 25, and he did a documentary about it.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about that. I told him, I was like, I'm going to beat your record. He's like, don't do it until the documentary came out because he knows that I can. You know what I mean? But I think I would do, I'd try. I mean, I guess you try and make it to 30 or even 28. But I would have to, what I would do is I would rent a space and then use that full 24 hours. So I would do shows every hour, starting at 3 or 3 o'clock show, 4 o'clock show, 5 o'clock show, 6 o'clock show. So I would just keep doing it.
Just use this space.
Yeah, just come in here to the podcast studio.
No, downstairs.
No, I would love that. Yeah, I would
done.
love that.
Just tell me the day, and we'll do it.
That would be the deal. I think that's a next year thing. The thing that I really want to do after seeing Free Solo is I want to do 1,000 sets in a year. So that would be 2.7 sets a day.
Uh-huh.
And I just think that would be a Guinness Book of World Records, and I'm not sure anybody could ever beat that. I just don't know that anybody would for a year perform that much. So I was going to do that in 2020, but I think I'm going to wait and do it in 2021 maybe.
2020 here at Stand Up New York, we'll do the 27 sets in a day.
Well, if you're willing to sort of do a show every half an hour and
Yeah.
like shuffle through the audience,
and we'll fill it up.
yeah, I think to be honest with you, I think I could get up to like, yeah, you could. I mean, if you did starting at 4 a.m.
Let's just say 24 hours, you'll do
No,
48.
you could do, yeah, you could do like 40 sets easily. And but honestly more, because in some of these clubs, it's like the stand has 2 rooms. And so some of these clubs, you just do a show, go upstairs and do a show, and then you have 2 shows done in a half an hour.
Right.
So when you bounce around to those, and they, you do Greenwich Village Comedy Club, bounce over to the Grizzly
No,
Pear,
forget
then over to
downtown.
Village Lantern.
We want you up here. We'll work out something with West Side. We'll go back and forth there. It's like a block away.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. But that can only be a portion of the, the shows. I think I like what you're saying, which is like the late night all exists here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, TJ Miller, thanks again for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I wish I could stay longer and talk more about things, but I have to go eat sushi at the Omakase room with Tatsu, with the producer of SiriusXM, because strangely they paired with Pandora, and that and podcasts have suddenly appeared as this, like, everybody thought, oh, podcasts are for free, you're never going to make money. And now, like, audio is really, really something, because people can do it while they're doing something else.
I think more people are reading audiobooks now too than paperbacks.
Because I think you can do it while doing something else. You can't watch I had the funny Peaky Blinders. That would have been so funny if I thought of it right away. You can't watch Peaky Blinders and do something else, Right. And so I think that's a big part of it. I find myself watching stuff and I'm looking things up on my phone, and it's just gotten really bad. So Kate and I have been being good about just like shutting off for periods of time.
I don't even have my phone on me. When I leave the house, I don't bring the phone.
But you gave your phone number out to the Twitter mob, so I'm glad you don't.
You have 2 phones in your pocket. Why do you have 2 phones in your pocket?
This is my work phone. This is my personal phone.
So are you like in the CIA?
I used to have an assistant. We used to have a personal assistant, and it was exorbitant how much money we paid them. And then I realized that if I replaced her with this, that I didn't have to pay anything except for a second line, and all I do is text. I advance all my own dates. I was doing the social media marketing anyway. No one can, so it's so much better for people to directly contact me instead of me being like, talk to my assistant, and she would always fuck stuff up. It was crazy. And I always wanted her to transcribe my sets, and she would never do it. None of these assistants would do it. None of them.
Huh.
So
they just say no?
And now they just would, it's, I don't know, maybe Kate and I are too nice or something, but I would hardline it with some of these people, and they just couldn't get it together. One of our assistants kind of fell in love with Kate, and that was really weird and made it weird for the whole thing. Another one just sort of lied and tried to embezzle from us. Another one was fucking a married guy in our office space when we were out of town.
I'm sorry about that.
Another one was helping her fuck that married guy and making sure we were out of town. It's like, we've never had a good experience with an assistant. Never. So, got a lot of good experiences with this one. And this assistant can show you pornography if you needed to,
Well, thanks so much once again.
Thank you for having me. It's always wonderful to talk to you. Yeah, I'd love to come back anytime.
Excellent.
And, your friend, Mr. Cohen, is very, very Jewish. So I'm always up for kind of being around his energy.
There are 20 famous Steve Cohens, and this is number 1 of all the Steve Cohens.
I think so. That's very
Steve
true.
Cohen, the congressman, Steve Cohen, the hedge fund manager, Steve Cohen,
Would
the
you
magician.
say you're the most Jewish of all the Steve Cohens?
They're all Cohens.
They're all Cohens. There is no one who's more Jewish than the other. Did you guys hear my joke about the Israeli club owner that came? It's a story, but who came up to me and she goes, "Are you Jewish?" And I said, "No."
Oh yeah, I did hear this. Yeah.
Yeah. I I love that she said, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I'm me." And then she was like, "I think you're Jewish." And I was like, "I think that people like to see themselves. I reflect back to people who they are, and so they want to kind of, have me be a part of their clan, Scandinavians, toddlers, gay people." And she said, "No, no, no. No, we Jews, we think we're the chosen people, so we don't want any more Jews. So we don't want anybody else to be Jews. We don't want any more Jews." And I used everything I could do, not as a comedian, to say, "I know another guy who didn't want any more Jews," and so I guess he was Jewish, but he was very adamant about it. But she wouldn't have thought that was funny, I don't think.
No.
Jewish Americans have a better sense of humor about themselves than Israelis do. But Israelis still have really great sense of humor, and they'll be very self-deprecating. I met some Israeli people that I really love and really got the joke, I mean, if you were the smartest type of people, then you'd be a little bit self-deprecating too.
Exactly.
What's this new thing everybody's talking about? The Ozvagani Jews or the
Sephardic Jews, you mean?
No.
Ashkenazi Jews?
Ashkenazi?
That's not
Everybody
really
says those are the smartest of all the people.
Well, no, I don't know if that's true though, but it's the Eastern European Jews versus the Middle Eastern Jews. So
And is-
Ashkenazi is the Eastern European, Sephardic is the Middle Eastern.
By the way, you were saying like, oh, we're self-deprecating. Do you know who invented sarcasm?
What, Jews?
Yeah.
No, it's got to go like this. I'm going to help you with it. Do you know who invented sarcasm? I did.